So welcome to the channel and welcome to this video featuring the FlightFactor 777 version 2 and more specifically the newly implemented cruise forecast and descent forecast winds. So we're going to jump straight in and I'm going to give you some considerations as to how you can decide what are the most effective winds that you can enter into the FMC. Then we're going to take a look at entering those winds into the FMC. And finally, I'm just going to show you how the flight performed against the flight plan, so a bit of data at the end. So a great example to remind ourselves how winds impact our flight time, in this case tailwinds, is a real world flight here. So it was TUI Airways flight 7138 from East Midlands to Naples. Now currently recording this on the 10th of October. I'm using my standard values of a cost index of 43, a zero fuel weight of 170 tonnes, and just as a reminder, if you want to see the fuel factor, click more options. That's there, that's what it reads from the saved airframe. And I'm just using flight level 370 just so that we can encounter the winds that that particular flight did, because that was flown in a 737. If I left that to auto, SimBrief would probably go ahead and suggest something like flight level 410, which I don't need as it doesn't fit the example. So now we're going to click on Briefing Preview and we can see that the average wind component is fairly weak, 20 knots there. Trip time is therefore 2 hours 34, requiring 15.2 tonnes of fuel. So I've now set the departure time to the 6th of October, which matches the flight conditions that we are going to demonstrate, and it was quite an early departure time, around about 6 AM. Leave everything the same, click on Briefing Preview. Have a look at the average wind component, so we've got now 73 knots there. It's still a tailwind, and what's that done to the time? So it's took over 15 minutes off that, saving us over a ton of fuel. As a reminder, the FinRes plus alternate, see where it says FMC info, so type 7.1 into your FMC reserves in this example. So if we click on generate flight, that may take a few moments, but don't worry, I've got one that I made earlier. So here's our flight plan, and well, that bit you've already seen there, haven't you? And you know what I'm going to say, just check your cruise altitude is as expected as well. But if you wanted to know a bit more about this, you know, your winds at each waypoint are listed there and so on, but I'm going to show you a nice little neat trick, and that is right at the end of your flight plan. You've got a wind information page. So the wind information page has all of the wind data summarized in one place. Now that's great because, as we know, the FlightFactor 777 now has the ability to incorporate the winds into its FMC forecasts. We do have to enter them manually. Don't panic. Don't need to enter all of this data. So just to quickly explain to you what this is telling us. So climb, for example, they're all the winds it's saying that we're going to encounter on the climb, and they are the flight levels. So flight level 100, 150, 200 and so on. That's the wind direction and the wind speed. Same for top of climb, and then here's our first waypoint of Midhurst. So assume that we stayed at flight level 370 for the entire trip, which is what I'm going to do. They're the winds that we should encounter there across the 370 line. But that doesn't mean that we need to enter all of the winds per waypoint. No. What the FMC will do, if we only entered here the winds at Midhurst, 320 degrees at 57 knots, it would just propagate that down the FMC through all of these waypoints, and it would just assume that that's the only wind that you're interested in. The key to this, the secret that really makes your FMC forecast quite exciting and nice and accurate, is by just thinking about entering what is the most significant change and then enter those. Okay, so we're going to enter Midhurst. We need to enter that. That's going to be its starting point. And whilst I mentioned climb winds, I'm not going to enter those on this occasion. The next one I'm going to enter is here. Why not the previous one? I mean, it does increase there, but I think if there was Resme and then nothing much, if there's nothing changing significantly much after Resme, I would enter that, but we've got that, and then we jump to sort of 84 knots, don't we? And that's in play for quite a while, and then we're coming up to like 97 knots. So here I'll enter another one at Mokip and we'll just, when you enter these as well, I'm not going to enter like 351 at 97. I'll enter 350 at 100. Coming along here then, like I say, we're going to round this up to 100 anyway, so let's not worry there. It's increasing a bit, 104. After that, everything's pretty much 350 at 100, isn't it? It goes above 100 knots briefly, but like I say, you don't need to worry about each knot and each degree. We're doing stuff that's significant, so remember, it's just going to think now the winds are in play 350 at 100 all the way to here, and then this is definitely a significant change, isn't it? So here I will enter 360 at 70. Just draw it down a bit, and then same with Evuli, because that's definitely what we're looking at there, 25 odd knots. I'll enter there 330 at 50. I haven't explained something else either. There's another column of data per waypoint, this one here. So these are your temperatures. We'll look at this on a future topic, so I'm not going to factor those in today. And in relation to the descent winds, so I'm just going to enter 2 altitudes there, and the direction and speed that you can see there. So again, why have I chosen those? So let's have a look at what's going on at top of descent. Well, it's as per Evuli, so 370, we're going to tell it that we've got 330 at 50. Look down here, when does it change significantly, which flight level? Even down at 200. It's kind of slowing off, isn't it now? So that's why I've chosen that. Same direction, but 20 knots slower. So we'll enter that. And then at flight level 100, it's swung around now by sort of 30 degrees, and it's halved, doesn't it, in speed? So that's why we'll enter that. Now, what does the FMC now think about this information? How's it going to use it in terms of, if it knows the winds at flight level 200 are that, and then the winds flight level 100 are that, what use is that, say, at flight level 150? So the answer lies with a mathematical practice called interpolation. So let's have a look at these figures that I've now put on here. So halfway between flight level 200, flight level 100 is of course flight level 150. Now we can do a same calculation there with the wind direction. So 330, round up, call it 360, halfway between 345. Again, wind speed. So you get the idea there. We're doing that because we simply haven't got the data for each square centimetre on the Earth and within the atmosphere, and we don't need it. So we're telling the FMC what it's starting with, how it's going to, or what the end point is, and then it will form that picture then. So we can apply there, if you're familiar with maths, we can apply there a nice linear equation to get from A, i.e. 200, to B, at flight level 100, and it can do this with all the flight levels in between. It can now build that into its forecast within, in this case, within the descent segment. Okay, so just to complete our pre-flight setup, here's a reminder of our figures on the Perfinic page. I've left the progress page visible there so that you can see the impact of when we enter the winds. Okay, so to enter the wind data, so here's Midhurst. I'm going to click on route data. I'm going to click on the arrow. So first we need to enter the flight level, and now enter the winds that correspond to that flight level on the right hand side. So we can see a big difference there in relation to the fuel already. Now you don't have to go back to the legs page, you can just click on to next page and find the next waypoint where you need to enter something. Before we do that, notice the font size here compared to the next waypoint there at Bognor. So it's kept the wind, but the fact that it's in small font there, that's just indicating that it's pulled it from a prior waypoint. So 350 at 80. If you want, you can click onto the entry that's already there, pop it down into the scratch pad. So in this case, we're going to reuse the heading, but just a different wind speed is going to go in there for Mockip. Here's Kugix. Ivuli. So let's go to the VNAV page and then to page 3. Go on to forecast. Remember, we're just going to enter 2 levels in here, so we've got flight level 200. Right hand side, and this part really what we're doing now, this is to help VNAV plan the VNAV profile. So generally if you've got a tailwind on the way down, you're going to need more miles in order to descend and slow down. So definitely showing that we're going to be landing with more fuel by entering the winds than had we have not entered in the winds. I've not been taking much notice of the Zulu time just because it's took me a few minutes to do that. Let's take a look at the final result. So we've just landed in Naples, lovely landing on runway 06 to top off what was a lovely flight as well. Okay, so on this page I'm just showing you the taxi fuel. Didn't do anything there to influence the SimBrief figure of 286, but the taxi and APU fuel was 337 kilos. Having a look at the trip time, SimBrief said 2:15, total burn 13.9 tons. We finished pretty close to that, 5 minutes longer, probably about a couple of 100 kilos more than forecast. Total fuel used again just includes the taxi and APU fuel there, and the estimated takeoff weight pretty much similar there to the gross weight. That was read 1 minute into the flight, so by that point those engines are drawing a lot of fuel, so 600 kilos, that would be definitely to be expected. Wind data, do feel free to pause this, and but if I just explain to you the plan values where it says plan, so that's what SimBrief forecast, and then the actuals is what we read at these respective waypoints. So let's have a look at Midhurst, where we'd got fuel on board. At that point should have been 18.6, and you can see there it was pretty much spot on, wasn't it? The altitude, wind speed, so we'll just focus a little bit on those. Before I do that, if I just tell you the times, how to read that, so that's 16 minutes versus 17 minutes, but when we get down to top of descent down here, where it's got 150, that means 1 hour 50. I was just too lazy to put the colon in there. But really then now, just looking at the actual winds that we got, I just want to compare those with what we entered into the FMC. So actual red at Midhurst was 327 at 65, and we put in there 320 at 60. So the reason why I'm just showing you these is the accuracy of the data that went into the FMC. That's pretty much near enough for it to make a good computation there, for it to make a good estimate of fuel on arrival. Then it would have took into account ODBU just here, where we said we'd have winds of 350 at 80, and we encountered 345 at 85. So again, that was pretty close. Mockip, we said we'd have 350 at 100, and the actual red was 350 at 103. Kugix was where we said we'd have winds 360 at 75, and it read there 348 at 62. So again, near enough. Ivuli is where things started to slow down, and as we said, we'd have 330 at 50, and it read 331 at 47. Hope you've enjoyed this video where we've taken a look at entering cruise forecast and descent forecast winds, and really just making adjustments to them so that you can establish what's relevant while still giving the FMC the data in order to make an accurate prediction. Any comments or questions, do let me know, and I'll see you soon on a future video. Take care. Bye bye.